So guys, girls, welcome to King Panda Talks, King Panda TV. And I'm your host, King Panda. Today we have somebody very special. And we have someone who actually, disclaimer, um, he's family. So he agreed to be on the show because he's family. But we have in our midst a person who I think made a lot of waves in real estate and is still making waves, who's making important strides in our economy and helping the economy grow, which is what we talk about all the time, no? That's what we need. So today we have David Leechiu,
Thank you.
CEO of Leechiu Properties.
Thank you, King Panda.
You're
Thanks. Thanks
welcome.
for having me over.
You're welcome. You're
Yeah.
welcome. So please, guys, excuse David. He's a little bit under the weather, and he still went with the interview. So I'm very impressed. So let's kick things off with something light, because I know there's a lot of interviews out there on how you started, how you began in the industry. From the start, ba you were interested in real estate, or is it something that you just happened to?
Yeah, I think real estate was one of the easiest places to make money. The other place was the stock market. I thought that it was more sustainable if I went to real estate. And then in real estate, there were two kinds. You were either working for a consulting firm
Mhm.
or you work for a developer. I guess in the developer, you make a lot of money upfront by flyering. You
Retail
flyer,
sales.
yeah, retail sales, and then you get chamba with a big buyer, and you make 2-3 million pesos at 24 years old at 1995, 1996, which at that time was a lot of money. Or you go and work for a consulting firm where the pay isn't so great, but they fill you with a lot of knowledge, and I thought that was more appealing to me. So
And
that's where I went. I went to a consulting firm.
and we have a lot of viewers na they're not very well versed with consulting. Alam nila yung
Okay.
flyering because they get a lot of flyers all the time. I
Yeah.
do too. But on the consulting side, what normally happens? What does somebody do
Yes.
when they start?
So we started off by just doing basic data gathering. We do analysis. We do valuations. We basically will tell you, oh, what are you going to do with your money? You buy this property. When you buy this
Ah,
property, we can then tell you what are you going to do with it. Are you going to build a hotel, a residential condo, an office building? What are the returns going to be like? What happens when you borrow money? What are the demand drivers going to be like? So all those things we can answer for you. And so that I think was a lot more engaging mentally. And fortunately the money followed also. And at that time, I worked for the Cuervo family together with their joint venture partner, Richard Ellis. Richard Ellis
hmm,
today evolved to
RLS,
become
yes.
CBRE
They were here pala. They were here in the Philippines.
way back through a joint venture with the Cuervo family. Yeah.
Mm. So you basically went through the consulting route and you built your clientele from there. It's no different than being a stockbroker,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
you're technical. Sa amin naman baliktad eh. When I was working for the firm at that time, they told us after training is to remove the word financial advisor and replace it with salesman. So when you get back to the office, you're
Yeah.
not an analyst. You're a salesman. So,
Yeah.
yeah, your job is to sell. So was it the same thing? You had to obviously you had to get clients.
Yeah. Actually, all these titles confuse people. At the end of the day, you have all these terms called property consultants or financial advisors or, you know, property whatever. At the end of the day, we are
You're
just
sales.
brokers. We're
You're
just
sales.
brokers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we sell. Going to the most real title would be broker, and that's unpretentious. And so every time somebody asks me what do I do, and then I say to them I'm a broker. I guess I was lucky because I saw the best of times and I also saw the worst of times. And that gave me a full education of the economy of the country, about what people go through when they are going through a crisis and what people go through when they're going through a boom. It's a curious study of human nature.
I think psychology would have been a better major for people going into sales. Kasi you're really managing emotions at that point, no?
Emotions, egos, emotions of fear as well as greed, very similar to the stock market.
Yeah. When did you start? I mean, like day one.
1995,
Oh
and
wow.
it just so happened that I was I quit my job. I There's a taipan that hired me from college because I was recommended to them. After a year, I thought that my time there was up, and I tried to go into trading, just buying and selling stuff
Mhm.
as a young Chinese dude, and
Entrepreneur.
trying to take the entrepreneurial route without really knowing where to go. We thought of like having a barbecue stand somewhere in Commonwealth Avenue near UP. If I did that, it would have been a very different world for me.
Yeah.
And my mom always said, as a young guy that's fairly well educated, you will always have roads open up to you, doors open up to you, and you going into each one of those doors will cost you time. Sometimes many of those doors are just distractions and you have to
Yeah.
stay focused on something.
But sometimes if you don't open those doors, you won't know where to go.
Yes.
So it's a balancing act, you know?
Yeah. You never really know.
Yeah.
You never really know.
When you started in 95, so baptism of fire, because 97 was a very pivotal year, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. 97 was really, the first half was like a level of invincibility, and then the next 10 years after that was like dreadful.
Wow.
It took the Philippines 8 years to get out of that crisis, in 97. We were very slow because of all the structural impediments we had preventing us from getting out sooner. I think it's more
So,
human nature kasi people were nice eh. People were not very brutal. So when you're too nice, I guess, and you're not willing to take the pain very fast, quickly, then you just delay things.
so were people holding on to stuff that they shouldn't be, or
That's one. That's one. But also, for example, the economic crisis led to a political crisis
yes,
everywhere in Asia.
yes,
Diba? The regime in Indonesia changed, Thailand changed, Vietnam changed, Japan, and Philippines was last. And when we had, President Estrada, then he got deposed. We brought in
Jimmy.
Jimmy, and then we were trying so hard to depose Jimmy also.
I
So,
think it's a tradition.
yeah. And so all that crisis just became an impediment for Philippines to prosper, to progress faster. 5 years into the Asian financial crisis, we were still not stable politically when every other country in ASEAN was
Moving on.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were like so fast out of the door of the crisis, and we were still stuck there wallowing. One kudita is not enough. You have to do 10. You have to do 20. Why? Because what's a kudita anyway here in the Philippines? Wala.
It's a rite of passage.
It's a venue to sell more taho and halo-halo and fish balls to the people going to the riots.
And reconstruct Manila Ped.
Manila Pen, or hang out in Edsa Shang.
So that was, what do you think was I mean, obviously you were a young guy going through this ridiculous crisis that, an educated person would look at it and say, what are we doing? But in your mind, what do you think was the biggest problem why we couldn't get out, besides being nice?
I think that we closed off the country kasi post the first Marcos
Yes.
administration, there were so many nationalistas that made the foreigners the enemy. When we should have looked at ourselves deeper and say these are the
Our
problems.
friends. Yeah.
Yeah, these are our friends, and that they're not here to take away stuff. We should have realized that we are the problem and what are the things we need to sort out. Instead, we said, oh, foreigners can only own 40%. And
Let's redo the constitution and protect
yeah,
everything inside, no?
yeah. And because of that, very few foreigners could invest. Why would if you're a foreigner with more money, more expertise, more talent, more access to technology, why would you enter into a joint venture and do all that
For
for
40%.
40%? There's no way.
And do you think, this is probably a controversial question, and I've spoken to a lot of friends about it. Do you think the 40% rule is one of the reasons why a lot of these foreigners had to resort to dummy corporations.
Well, to be fair, it's not just the foreigners doing that. It's
Well,
also the locals
locals are doing that.
because of other reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what they had to do, and it empowered the locals, and it didn't necessarily contribute to their competence or to their growth. I guess the mentality is that, oh, I'm the dummy,
Ah,
so you can't do anything without me.
boss ako eh. Yeah.
Ako yung boss. But really, no, di ba? I guess it made a lot of people entitled, falsely entitled, and that became part of the problem.
So going through those 10 years of, I'd say, trough, no? What did you do at that time?
Because, I got married in 1998, and then at that time, ano pa eh, we weren't really sure about what was going to happen to the economy, di ba? 1998. And then everything went super downhill from
yeah.
there. So I guess we just had to keep our head low, keep our debt levels low, save as much as we could, and work very hard. So fortunately, because of my exposure as a Chinese growing up in an entrepreneurial household, we worked very, very young age, and we worked very long hours. I mean, like my parents worked, as your mom and dad would
When
attest.
did Auntie never work?
When did my mom ever stop working?
Yes,
Or my dad, di ba?
yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and those were very hard years. We didn't have a car. That's why I'm inis with some of my employees sometimes when they say they can't get from place A to place B. And it's like, the hell. I took the jeep, bus, tricycle. We had no car, and when my mom was able to buy a car,
You had one. and
we
then-
had one
yeah.
car that every one of us shared, and it was chaos. But also, I refused. When she wanted to buy me a car, I refused, and I said no. You've done so much already for us, all of us. Let me do this on my own. So fortunately, my boss sold his car to me at a good price, a fair price, a good price. But he was very kind. Yeah, and so my boss sold my first car was from that boss.
So you were commuting at that time were you in Quezon City pa? And then Makati, no?
At that time, yeah, I was in Quezon City. I was in Commonwealth, and then the office we would go to is in Ortigas Center in Padilla Building.
Was traffic pretty bad at that time already?
Super, and there were so much construction then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
The Skyway was not Skyway, but overpass. The overpasses
Overpasses.
were being constructed.
yeah.
Then the
Overpasses.
tunnels in Cubao were being constructed.
Yeah. You're much younger than me,
Yes. Well,
but you remember that. That's good.
my dad keeps telling me. I was actually not here. I was in the US and then I left 94. No, 92. I left 92. And then I only came home twice, 93 and 94.
Okay.
And doon na ako. But I remember my dad telling me traffic was so bad that we couldn't import V8s anymore because nobody wanted to buy V8s. So
couldn't floor it.
couldn't floor it. Nobody would buy it. But at that time, American trucks were all V8s.
Wow.
So we had to buy Japanese trucks, But I remember my dad telling me it was a particularly tough time. Kasi especially in our business, cars, pag walang negosyo, people tend to be more frugal.
Yeah.
No. But in real estate, is that when you were going through those 10 years of trough, how hard was it, to get clients? Because I'm sure they still have money. In the US, we were taught na when things are bad, that's when you start buying.
Yeah.
That's when you start deploying your capital.
Yeah.
How was the appetite at that time?
It was only available to very few because at that time there was no middle class. There's a very, very, very small amount of middle class, and the remittances were not as significant
Yeah.
as before. I mean, in year 2000, remittances were $5 billion. So it must have been in 1997, 98. It was much lower than that. Siguro mga 3 billion
Wow.
or 4 billion. So it was not a significant part of the economy. It was probably one of the biggest items for revenue, but not a big component. And interest rates were crazy at that time. I remember my mom's loan was 16% fixed for 2 years. 16%, and
Fixed pa yun for
And
short term.
yeah, and the buyer would need to put in 40-50% equity. So she had to borrow from her brother, her sister to be able to meet the payment and then pay the bank and then the two siblings over a long period of time. And then the car was like 25-30% per annum.
Wow.
How can you make any money on interest rates that level?
Doubles every 4 years.
When people are shocked with 5, 6, 7, 5% interest rates going to 8,
That's
it's
nothing.
like,
I mean, even in the US, I remember friends and clients at that time telling me, because we, going through those times, we saw 4.7% fixed 30-year interest rates at that time.
grabe.
But clients would tell me, nah, the only reason I'm refinancing is because I've never experienced this. Because when they bought their first home and they're baby boomers, they were paying 12, 13%. So
Yeah.
dito pala, ganun din nun.
Yeah, much higher. And then I remember during the days of, I know, when we were deposing President Estrada, transitioning to GMA, interest rates were at 20 plus percent. It's crazy. And then everyone is converting to dollars. Everyone. Everyone. Because it went from 26 to 50 to
Yeah.
56 in a very short span of time. And at that time, pre AMLA, you could move as much money as you want
Yes,
outside.
there was no issues.
Yeah. And there was no confidence whatsoever with the Philippine government. You'd think that another rebel group will succeed in deposing the
Deposing,
existing administration and you're back to square zero, you know?
it's not even one, it's square
Yeah,
zero.
it's
Yeah.
square zero. You're back to negative territory because you have to start all over again with new policies. So unstable.
I remember that, my dad telling me, pumasok ka sa college, 24 ang dollar. Sabi niya, 50 ng dollar, di ka pa gumagraduate. Sabi niya, I'll give you 1 year, and if you don't graduate, you're coming back home. So at that, I was on the 5-year program, so I didn't want to come home. So, but that was, I mean, imagine going from 24 to 50. That was, I mean, if you were a trader, imagine the cost. Inflation must have been ridiculously high.
And no hedging.
No, yeah, there was no hedging at that time because people never knew how to hedge. I
And
mean,
and
it wasn't a common practice before.
and it probably would have been very expensive.
Kasi wala tayong resources to do it like before, no?
Mm-mm.
Like now. But so after those 10 years, you had to go through that. What were the lessons that you've learned in? Kasi obviously, clientele, they're very few and far between.
Yeah,
You had to make a living.
Yeah.
You got married, you have kids.
yeah.
So, how cutthroat, malamang cutthroat yun.
Well, fortunately, I'd like to think that I didn't take too many shortcuts and cut corners. No, I mean, we still paid our taxes. I never brought clients to the girly bars or never paid anything under the table
Yes.
or get illicit commissions. I mean, I just focused on I'll earn money from doing deals.
The right way.
Yeah, it was not easy. And then at that time, the colonial mentality was so strong that as a local, we were always just low level people. We can never compete with the Caucasian manager, CEO, expat. I remember being sent to AmCham and ECCP and all this. Dude, nobody's gonna talk to you, man. Don't bother talking to the. It was always the Caucasians in one table, the Asians in one table, the locals. Just talk to the locals. There's no way you'd get any airtime, and yet I was fortunate to have a boss that kind of opened up the idea that hey, that's you have to fight against that. And here, and he opened doors for me to be able to have confidence in myself to say, you can do this. And yes, they're white. Yes, they can talk about cricket. But after talking about cricket and getting drunk in Burgos, they'll still want to do a deal.
Yes.
And they will probably give it to the guy who can do the deal better than just talking about cricket. That was a big learning for me. It was hard to appreciate. Kasi you're trained all your life to be subjected by the colonial power,
It's funny because you go to the U.S., you're a second class citizen,
Hmm.
and then you come back to your own country
Yeah, in
in
business.
business. You're also, but that was then. No, that
Yeah,
was then.
yeah.
So going through that, obviously you did pretty well. You
I
just
did okay. I
focused
did
on
okay. Yeah.
the right way of doing things because dito alam mo naman pag sales, kasama yung under the table, mga girly bar, mga ano kasama yan eh.
Yeah, yeah.
But you actually did not go that route and you still did fine. After those 10 years, what happened?
So after crisis, the boom, there was stability already, and then the BPO industry came in, and I was fortunate enough to be
This was
working
still GMA's time, ano?
GMA's time. So 2021 was when the first BPO started coming here to 2002, 2003, and we were fortunate that because we were dealing with one of the first BPOs here, it educated me to a whole world that nobody knew, and I just kept trying to study it.
This was
And
Convergys.
a company called Sykes.
Sykes.
Yeah,
Sykes was the first one.
one of the first ones. Actually, yeah. There's a company preceding that was a company called Software Ventures, a local company that Citibank gave backroom services to.
Mm.
But it at that time it was still so raw. They were one of the few local outsourcing groups here. But what really made the difference was the volume of work from call centers. And that was made possible because of the tech bubble. You had a company called Global Crossing
Yes,
that
I
raised
remember Global
so much
Crossing.
money from the world. They wired the entire planet with
Yep.
fiber, and that made the Philippine labor market accessible to the West. Because of that, the cost of E1 T1 lines fell
Became cheaper, yeah.
super cheap. From 40,000 US dollars a month, it crashed to like below 2,000
Wow.
in a span of like 3-4 years. So imagine if you were the telco like PLDT or Globe and you were earning off 40,000 and all of a sudden boom from 40,000 to
2000.
2,000. But the volume made up. Because yeah, you were getting 40,000 but you had like 100 customers.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden you had T1 and E1 requirements all over the Philippines. That made a difference for everyone.
And so at that time, it was the BPOs were starting to come in.
Yeah. And people didn't really understand or appreciate it. So my firm and I had the first crack at the few BPOs because we
They were
understood it.
leasing offices like crazy, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was from 2000 to 2000 up to now. That's pretty much still the bread and butter of the Philippine office market.
And this is the time wherein everything was being outsourced, even production. China was starting to move na rin, di ba?
Yeah.
I guess the good thing is you'll never get call centers in China because they don't speak the language like we do.
Yeah.
Di sila madali maintindihan,
Yeah.
especially
They can't
with the
adapt.
accent.
Yeah.
They have
they
a
can't-
very neutral English accent.
Yeah, it's very difficult to find Western aligned culture like Philippines. Very, very difficult. I have clients up to now. Well, beginning 2005, 2006, they've been asking themselves, where is the next Philippines? Where you can get cheap English,
Yes.
but culturally aligned to the West. So difficult to find. And up to now, 24 years after, they're still looking for that
They're still
country.
looking.
Yeah.
I think it's it's the colonial mentality, like you said. It worked well for us, but it also, in reverse, it also hinders us from growing.
Yeah.
Kasi,
Just like in the 80s and 90s, the Philippines was one of the first adopters to MTV. It
Yeah.
probably made us to be who we are. Very good singers, dancers, culturally aligned. Soft skills are very strong
yes,
because of MTV. And then you see that again when the world says that the Philippines is one of the biggest users of Facebook.
yeah,
Diba?
true.
And now,
We have the highest penetration rate actually for social media.
yeah, so now we're the biggest users of TikTok and IG in the world.
Yes.
You have to ask yourself, what are our employees doing really?
Especially with unlimited data
With
nowadays.
unlimited data.
We can blame our friends from the telcos for that, but the appetite for information, and I guess it has its good and bad points, no? Because information can be good
Yeah,
and information can be detrimental as well. Kasi maraming fake din eh. You know, and
super,
sometimes we can't distinguish between the two. You know?
super.
So especially in business nowadays, and daming, I mean, bigla na lang fake. You know, somebody died, CEO died, and the stock price already crashed. But in the meantime, hindi pala totoo. You know,
Yeah.
things happen like that in the U.S. At least dito wala pa
We're not sophisticated enough, or the money's not big enough to be worthwhile.
to be worthwhile. Yes, exactly. But so when you were with the firm, when was Leechiu and Associates?
Okay, so 2003, at the height of our political crisis, the peso kept devaluing, and while we were growing in peso terms, when you convert that to dollars, it became very small.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was working for Savills, which is a global company. And Saville said, "Okay, we're thinking of shutting down the business, but because we like you, why don't you run the franchise of our business?" That's how they helped me set up my own business together with Nando Camus, my father-in-law, and Angela Padilla. So the three of us set up this company called Leechiu and Associates, member of Savills International.
Savile is based where?
Is a UK
UK
business.
business.
It's an
Savile Row.
it yeah, yeah. So that's a 350-year-old company based out of the UK, and then they had a very strong office in Hong Kong. And from Hong Kong, they branched into Asia Pacific, and then they branched into Western Europe. And then at that time in 2003, they were still pretty much a European Asian business. And they said Philippine numbers are too small when you convert it back to dollars, even though top line, bottom line, we were growing. They said, yours na lang, buy it for cost, have all our customers, we're out of here, but you carry our flag. That was hard because almost everything that I had in the bank, I used. Nando Camus had to borrow against his house. And remember, this is in 2003, after, we just took out Arab Estrada in year 2000. We still had rallies every day in Ayala Avenue, corner Paseo, trying to kick out
GMA
GMA.
naman. And I
So much
remember they
political.
stormed the palace too at that time.
And then there was all these like gulo, anti-GMA, pro-Arab, that were going to clash in and it was all very tense. And so because of that gulo, the peso kept devaluing, there was low FDI, etc., etc. It was a frightening time to set up your business.
This was a lot of uncertainty. You know,
Yeah.
what made you take the plunge?
The boss said, my boss said, look, we're
Mr.
gonna close.
Camus, Mr. Camus,
No, no.
Mr. Saville.
The Saville CEO said, look, the competitors are all there out to get you. They will hire you. You will never run out of options to go for the competition, to work for the competition. But you have the chance now to do something on your own.
It's
And
true.
then I was quite suspicious about that statement. And I was like, really? But then that afternoon, I went to see Nando Camus, and he said, that's so exciting. Let's do it. It's
Just like that.
just like that. And then, okay.
And this is a guy with how many years of experience under his
Yeah,
that
he's
time?
25, 30 years older than me. So yeah, he's
So
had
at least 10 years
yeah,
more.
yeah. So and he's seen through it all, He
Yeah.
was working in the 70s as a broker, 80s as a broker, 90s as a broker. So he's seen the ups and downs. He always has been the voice of calm and reason in our business. He was always somebody who was guiding us and mentor us through the business, as Angela and I, headless
Chickens with your
chickens.
head cut off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was what? I was 28, 29 when this happened.
Oh,
So
wow.
Angela must have been 28 also, 29. So we were almost the same age, Angela and I. Yeah, it was crazy. But then because we worked very well together, not perfectly together, but very well together, we made something of LNA, Leechiu and Associates, and that earned the attention of our competitor Jones Lang LaSalle, And so in 2007, they said, hey, we want to expand. Can we buy you?
Were they here at that time o wala
Yeah,
pa?
they've been
They're
here.
here.
We were competing with them for a long time. Since 1998, we were competing with them. When your enemy goes and says, hey, can we buy you? And then
It's like the white
uh,
flag.
you look at it with such suspicion. But then it's like you've always been the pirate ship, and then you've got the armada, aircraft carrier going beside you and say, hey,
Sama ka sa amin.
sama ka sa amin, but here's the ship. You
Yeah.
drive it. Kind of look at that with a bit of suspicion. But then after a while, I realized that that made sense. And so we did a deal, and we, at that time in 2008, made quite a bit of money that we never thought was possible. And in 2007, I also felt like there's something not quite right with the world. And so in 2007, I started liquidating a lot of my assets. And then in 2008, well, the little assets that I had, I tried to raise cash. And then this 2008 event happened where in April, we do a deal with Jones Lang and they pay us, and we're so liquid.
How long was that time frame?
When we
From the time
decided,
they made that call.
it was less than 4 months.
Wow.
Very quick. And
A deal that big. Na,
yeah. And it was so easy. Kasi number one, we had one book lang. It's not like most
Yeah.
companies where we had 2, 3, 4 books. Diba? We only had one book, very easy to audit, no explanations needed. In 2008, April was when we did the deal, and we were all cash. And then I said, wow, this is so perfect, because in late 2007, 2008, you're already seeing the cracks of what will become the GFC. And so we just waited and waited and waited. And we were able to buy stocks and real estate for a very good price when we started buying late 2008, early 2009. And I think the timing was so good for us that we were able to sell a business, liquidate assets, stay in cash, meaningful amount,
and grab.
and grab deals with no debt. Looking back was one of the few moments where things really worked in her favor. We're so lucky, so lucky.
What was your mindset at that time? Was it when this whole thing happened? Were you like, thank God it happened, or you knew it was going to happen, or it came at a total surprise?
The GFC was a total surprise. I don't think anyone knew that that was happening, and it was unthinkable. I mean, Citibank running out of money,
Yes.
AIG running out
Yes,
of money,
yes.
going bankrupt, bailed out, Lehman blowing up.
It was greed. I mean, at the end of the day, it was signs of it started manifesting in 2005. When AIG decides to come up with a insurance policy for banks to bet against their borrowers, you knew shit was gonna hit the fan. And it was a conversation over drinks in Vegas. So that was Goldman when they came up with that whole idea. But so dito sa atin noon, were we adversely affected? Not much, no?
No.
So I think we learned from 97,
Yes, but also 2008 was the crisis of the rich and wealthy.
Yeah.
If you didn't invest in bonds, which very few people in the Philippines didn't
Or
invest
mortgage
in
bonds specifically.
mortgage bonds, but even any kind of bonds here in the
Yeah.
Philippines. If you didn't invest in the stock market, and then less than a million accounts were in the stock market at that time.
Wow, it was that concentrated. Huh?
Super. And a lot of people had their money offshore with the investment bankers who then burned the money.
Burned them out.
If you ask middle class people and the poor, it's like, is your life
Ano
being
yun?
affected?
Ano yun?
No, not really. Do you own AIG bonds or stocks? No. Do you, it didn't really hit anyone. It was just a small group of people in Manila Golf and Manila Polo Club that were really
We're
hit.
wallowing.
Yeah. Another thing that I've learned is that you should never waste a good crisis. And I remember in the early 90s, mid 90s, my clients who were 10, 15 years older would always look back at the 80s and say that those were the best buy opportunities. When
Black
when
Monday.
you could have bought Forbes Park for less than 2,000 pesos per
Per
square.
square.
And from 2,000 pesos, it jumps to 20, 30, 40,000 pesos in less than 10 years. So you're making 10, 12, 15x on super prime assets in a very short span of time. So that taught me that a crisis doesn't last. I mean, it might go on for a long time, like, for example, the Marcos crisis, which started in the late 60s and it ended pretty much. And then we had a small boom, a short 5 6 year boom to 97, and then it continued, diba? So that was a 30-year crisis for the Philippines. And if I look back, where else in the world, what other countries in the world are they going through crisis of this long? You can look at Argentina.
Yes.
Argentina was one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and then they are today in a 30-year crisis already. Last year I was there, and the country is going through 230% inflation. It's insane.
Well, they did pay off the debt. I read. I think I read yesterday on the new president.
They're paying some debt.
Paid off the debt, but at the expense of a lot of social programs, which the poor really needed.
Yeah.
So
But then it was everyone was talking about subsidizing everyone,
yeah,
and that president had the balls to say, "We can't afford to
We can't
subsidize, so we got to get our stuff, our act together." You know.
I'm assuming he won't get reelected.
Well,
But you know, so
but-
going through those times, fast forward, now you're in a capacity wherein you're guiding careers now. I would assume because you're more. Do you still do deals? As in,
Oh yeah.
ikaw pa rin yung
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
you're still totally involved, or you let the brokers handle it?
I am I'm very involved in deals. I think from doing everything in a deal, I'm probably more focused now on strategy and winning the account and strategy and making sure that the team follows through to the end. And when they need me to
Step
to step in, I will step in. But I'm very very active in deals, and but I'm sharing these deals with so many people, so I'm never like working on a deal by myself.
Yeah. So basically, you have your whole team working, and it's like playing chess.
And it's been really great. It's been a really great ride.
Out of all the deals that you've done, what I don't know if you're at privy to say, or even if you don't say the specifics, what was the deal that you said, wow? I mean, we all have that, diba?
Yeah, I think I can't give too much color or detail, but the one that really changed my life was the Ortigas transaction, where I helped the SM family entrusted me to kind of get that deal for them, which is a big chunk of the Ortigas and Company. That was full of drama. It was full of cloak and dagger stuff. It really, but it also allowed me to see how simple the SM family is. I think more than anything, it gave me a lot of inspiration and hope. These people are super powerful, but they're super grounded. Like they are ridiculously grounded. It speaks so well of them. I just cannot say enough how gracious this family is. Really.
You can kind of tell when they speak in public, which is very rare.
Yeah.
Normally you just see them in pictures.
Yeah.
I did have a couple of instances where I heard a couple of the family members speak, and it's different. It's not an entitled way of speaking. It's very inclusive, I would say.
And so respectful. I mean, they're not perfect. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're super amazing.
So this is the
People.
reason why a lot of the Ortigas properties are being renovated. Look at Green Hills now. So
Yeah.
different. It's so different, and I'm so proud to live here because it's like 5 minutes away from us, and we now have a proper mall.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're still developing.
Yeah. Well, so Ortigas and Company is comprised of four entities now. So that's SM, the Ayalas are there also. A few of the Ortigas family members, and then the Catholic Church is also still there.
But Ortigas still maintains majority or pretty.
Well, Ortigas, the family Ortigas is now
Yes.
the minority.
Ah,
So the two biggest shareholders are SM and Ayala.
Ayala.
Yeah.
But look at what they've done. It's, I mean, putting
Yeah.
capital in, which
Yeah.
before it was just flailing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Diba? So this is, I think, this is something that's a promise that we can do it. And this is just local capital, David. This is not including foreign capital. Ano?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were there any foreigners that,
I think Singapore was always so hopeful of the Philippines because
no,
of,
in terms of the Ortigas deal?
oh no,
This
no,
is
no.
just
This is all local. This is all
Local deal
yeah.
lang yan, di ba?
Yeah.
And
Well, HSBC was a big owner. It was the single biggest owner of the company, and they were bought out by everyone.
so that, I guess the 2007 crisis helped by repatriating a lot of the money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can say that because of all the burning of the investment bankers, a lot of clients brought money back to Philippines.
So they'd rather burn it themselves and make their mistake than
Yeah.
somebody else, and taking a percentage on top of it, di ba?
Yeah,
So, that's what my dad kept telling me. It's like, you don't make anything, you don't build anything, but you earn something. Iba racket nyo eh. My dad visited one time and he spent the day with me at the office. And every time he would ask me, he's like, well, what do you really do? Like, so it took me days to kind of explain to him. Point was, with Ortigas and all these local companies being able to do that, imagine what foreign capital can do when it's
Yeah.
brought in.
but sometimes it's not just about money. It's also expertise, and I'm happy to say, naman, that the locals have enough expertise in particular fields. Certainly in real estate, I don't think foreigners can add any value to how things are done
Besides capital,
besides capital.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, design, you can always get an architect,
yes.
and
And
the internet is so full of pictures and videos of what can be done better in a particular project. So, to be honest, the foreigners really have a tough time, you know.
uh,
Even if they just want 40% of a project, it's really tough for them to justify coming in. I do hope that we open up the country, and I'm glad that there's a bill right now that
Yes.
allows foreigners to lease up to 99 years.
years. And I think that's a start.
That's
Right.
a big, even if we just stick with that, kahit yun na lang, don't let them own, but let them lease 99 years. That will be fantastic. It will be transformational for Philippines.
You think it's a big hindrance for a lot of these
Oh yeah.
companies?
Oh yeah. Kasi imagine you have a project. The project will take 10 years to break even if you're lucky. Break even lang yun. So you only really start making money 11, 12, 13, 14,
That's not
15
including
years.
construction. That's
Yeah,
just
that's
from
nothing- yeah.
operational na.
That's right. That's right. So you have 3 years of construction to 4 years to 7 years depending on the project.
So you're looking at
Y-
15, 16 years right there before
Yeah.
ROI,
Before break even.
break even.
Yeah. And then the first peso of ROI comes on year 16 to what? 30 years? And by that time, ano na yung NPV nun? Wala na. Zero
Wala
na.
Yeah, cost of money pa lang, talo ka na.
Yeah. So these are the things that normal people can't appreciate. And so sometimes they make laws that are unreasonable. So a 50-year lease really is too short. So we go 99, which I think puts us in the same league as Hong Kong and
Yes.
Singapore.
And Hong Kong grew, Singapore grew exponentially.
Well, of course, it's not enough, no? I mean, just because you have 19-year leases, it's not going to make you also. It's a prerequisite, but not enough. Not sufficient. You also need integrity in the way we do things, di ba?
Red tape,
Yes, which
less
is
corruption.
why I think the biggest issue is property rights. For example, you have a brand, you have IP, and somebody just copies it just like that next door. If you have a title and somebody scams you with the title, how easy it is for you to protect and defend and uphold it. You have squatters that have more rights than owners.
Yes, unfortunately.
So these are very complex things, and so protection of property rights is the other thing, which includes transparency. I guess the other thing is integrity. We all have to be sure that what people say they will do will get done, diba? If the mayor says, I will build a road here, it will happen next year, not 10 years from now.
Not after the third term.
I will collect your garbage and make sure it's disposed of properly, not like, dumping it in the river. Yung mga ganong issues.
Yes. But another issue I think that's very pressing and very controversial lately is the exit of a lot of the offshore gaming companies. No, you stated before that it will have a negative impact, especially because like right now we have a 34-month condo supply,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to before you couldn't even buy a condo sa
Yeah.
Pasay area because everything's being bought.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the impact in the next 3-4 years? Because I guess the government's trying to find revenue
Yeah.
to augment that. But
So let's talk about now, and let's talk about 3 to 4 years
yes,
from now. So the impact of that now is that um, investors are going saying, "Oh, here's the Philippines again, changing the rules midway, right? From yes, come in to like, hey, you guys all get out unilaterally." Yeah, I think we've penalized the majority for the offenses done by the few. That is the real stickler there. Immediately, the impact is the higher vacancies in the property market. All classes, hotels, residential, and office. In office, they just uploaded and let go of a total of 1 million square meters now in the last 2 years. That's a
wow,
lot of space
wow,
at a time when we have an oversupply. So the oversupply got increased by 1 million, which means that equilibrium between supply and demand will happen 1 year later to 2028. Thankfully, the office market in the Philippines is one of the best performing in the world because of the BPO industry and because of all these companies in old buildings upgrading to new ones. These two things are driving demand to stability. And the absorption rate is actually very good. We have a supply problem, we do not have a demand problem. Having a demand problem is a much bigger problem. A supply problem is very simple. Time will correct it.
yes,
And in 3, 4 years, it will stabilize. In the residential condo market, just like in the office sector, they have released another 1 million square meters of residential space. That's a lot of units. And all of them in the mid market. Okay?
wow,
So, what's happened? Rents in the Bay for your typical 25, 30 square meter unit has fallen from 25,000, 30,000 pesos a month now to like 8,000 pesos a month, 12,000
wow.
pesos a month. So, you've got a
How are you even gonna cover the dues?
50 to 70% reduction in rents, right? Whereas before, when the POGOs were happening, and you know that I was one of those defending the POGO sector, a lot of people were saying, hey, these guys are driving property prices so much higher. And I go, well, you had the opportunity to. The POGO market has been here less than 4 years. Where were you before they arrived?
Yeah,
Right? Why weren't you snapping up these properties? And now that rents have come down so much, I'm asking, where are these
where are you
people now?
now?
Yeah,
Where are
where are
you
you
now?
now?
Yeah,
They're so low now. Why don't
yeah.
you buy? Why don't you rent? You're totally not priced. Which is my point. You have all these people for the sake of bashing senseless.
Mema,
Yeah.
mema sabi lang.
Yeah, may
Diba?
masabi lang.
Yeah,
So we came out with this report that said that the vacancies have gone up through the roof, partly because of the POGOs, partly because of new supply, and partly because inflation and interest rates have eaten the middle class up. That they had to default on their condo purchases in the last 2 years.
what's the default rate right now?
Uh,
Mataas ba?
well, recently it hit a high of 80%, and that shocked everyone. It
Wow.
was very scary. I'm not talking about 80% of total supply.
Yes, yes.
I'm talking about 80% lang of the people who bought in the last 4 or 5 years. So the people who have been making installments defaulted, and the developers had to eat it. And they had to make refunds as the Macedo law requires them to do.
This is default after turnover or
No, pre-turnover.
pre pa?
Pre-turnover.
Wow.
So it was kind of shocking,
Wow.
di ba? A lot of people will put, the 50,000, another 50,000 every so often, and then they pull out. A lot of people are shocked, right? And then they're all panicking. And I go, hey guys, let me get this straight. 18 months ago, with all this Pogo fervor, you were complaining that they were pricing you out of the market. Now that rents have fallen 70%, 50 to 70%, and developers are so nice to you now that they will give you super extended terms that you've never seen before,
You're not buying.
and you're still complaining, and you're not buying. Where are you now? Di ba? The guys who were complaining 18 months ago.
They were never buyers. That's the thing.
So I realized, this is what I verbalized just 2 days ago lang. Parang, you're telling me it was so difficult to buy 18 months ago and you were complaining that you couldn't buy. Now that everything is so easy to buy and you can take your pick,
you can be choosy.
you can even dictate and bully the developer,
Yeah.
and you're not doing it. You're too scared. What's wrong? What's wrong in this equation? And then you're criticizing me for saying, David says it's the best time to buy now. It really is the best time to buy now.
Because it's cheap.
Because it's so cheap. What? Oh no. David's got an agenda. Well, the only agenda I'm gonna have is if you ask me to be your broker, diba? That's the only agenda I'm gonna have.
Yeah.
But since I don't know you, you have your girlfriend broker there to buy for you.
Well, that's normally the case why they became a broker.
So when I say, oh, the pogos are here and it's time to buy because it's rising and you can cash away, oh, David's got an agenda. And then the prices are falling, and I'm still saying it's even a better time now because prices are falling and terms are getting better. And I still have
You're
an
still
agenda.
the bad guy.
Yeah, I'm still the bad guy. It's like, come on, guys, give me a break.
I think it's a price of, number one, expertise. And number two, it's a price of faith.
Well, maybe, hopefully. I don't know.
It's an occupational hazard. Diba?
I don't know, but I really stand that if I could get terms like this now, I would totally go for it. And that's what I've been trying to do, and I've been fortunate enough to get super good terms with these developers.
And like you said, a lot of your clients from before who are 15, 20 years older than you always look back to history. And it always repeats itself, the money. And me being, we're about the same age, we've gone through the same thing. And it just keeps going back. Iba-iba lang ang face. It just looks different. You just have to be able to look beyond the numbers and
Yeah.
see it's the same thing.
Yeah.
People get scammed every how many years? There's
Yeah.
something that comes up, diba?
Yeah.
But now that we're here, the Pogos are gone. Apparently they're gone, but I still hear so many news that there's snippets of little places.
They're fighting.
They're fighting because the money is just so attractive. What's your
Prognosis.
vision? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a great time to buy. Soak up these assets. Yeah.
We're talking residential and commercial.
Residential, almost anything really. So let's focus on the mid-end residential. So buy mid-end residential, you will have to hold it for a bit, for 3-4 years, rent it low, super low, sign a 2, 3, 4 year lease. Rent it
Just
low.
to cover.
Just to tide you. But then the market's going to go back, and guess what's going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years? Interest rates are going to be lower.
Yes.
Diba? The US
They started going down.
Yeah, they started going down. So the US said, okay, 1 percentage point every year is probably the most they will do because they're still concerned about inflation. Well, that's 4 percentage points down in 3-4 years.
We're back to 2005.
So
Yeah.
so by the time that opens, the demand for buying real estate will be quite significant. In 3-4 years, work from home would have been
Disappeared,
extinct.
yeah.
Yes, it will be extinct. And people will have to go back. And in 3 or 4 years, the traffic will still be worse because people become wealthier. The first thing they do is
Buy a car.
buy a car. And the ones that are already wealthy call you.
They buy more cars.
Yeah, and they call you. So traffic will just get worse. There's no escaping it.
And I don't think there's enough land in Manila, or NCR at least, to build more roads.
Well, it's difficult. You need another strong arm like President Duterte to say, "Hey, I am going to build this road, and you better get the f out of the way," you know. And everyone says, "Yes, sir. Here, I'll sweep it pa for you," you know.
Kasi now it's like, parang, ano please, pwede ka umalis.
Yeah. Well, there's so the whole problems of right of ways become an issue again because we go back to protecting the individual's rights versus the common good.
Yeah.
Diba?
Unlike in the US, pag they're building a road, they could care less.
Yeah.
It's eminent. They call it eminent.
Eminent domain.
Eminent domain.
Yeah, and the right of the government to expropriate
Yes,
property.
it's they call on a national security issue or something. It's something in the Constitution, I think, that allows the government to do so.
Yeah.
Wala kang choice eh.
And I'm sure that it's the same here. It's the same here. Those laws are here, except that we are a country full of laws. We write so many laws, but we hardly implement any of them. And implementation is always difficult. So,
Implementation along EDSA is difficult.
yeah. Yeah, which is not to say that we don't. I mean, there are many good people that are trying
Yes.
so hard
Yes.
to make a difference, a positive difference to this country. So I'm so thankful that they are there.
Actually, this administration, marami.
Yeah.
It's more prevalent now than it was before.
I was fortunate enough to attend these Senate hearings and congressional hearings, and
Yes.
and of course, while we complain about the quality of our senators and congressmen, I'm actually quite inspired to see them in action and say, "Wow, this guy is galing pala," and that gave me a lot more hope about the country. That despite all our problems, there's still these people, and I wish there were more, but then there's enough to make a positive difference to the country.
And the younger ones are more idealistic, actually.
Yeah, yeah,
Iba na eh.
Yeah.
So we're seeing it now. Unfortunately, over the last few months, we've had a lot of hoopla because of this, but it's noise. So at least
Yeah.
something's happening, di ba?
I think at the end of the day, reason will prevail. Yeah, and I'm quite hopeful that whatever wrinkles are there now will get sorted out.
And it usually does.
So I think going back to this Pogo situation, unless we get them back, it's gonna take time to backfill. But there's enough of the population to backfill it. We are just not feeling it now because of work from home.
Mm.
But when the labor is back in the city, all that space will get backfilled.
I think that's the biggest problem that the pandemic brought us was work from home. And the
Yes.
quality of work too, it became
Yes.
a little bit more substandard,
Yes.
you know.
I get it. I totally get why people want to do work from home. But also, the reality is that companies have to be more honest about the data breaches that they've had because of work from home. They have to be honest about how poor the quality has been for delivering and building culture.
Mhm.
They're just not talking about these things now because they don't want to. You know who's working from home really well that's going to propel their career is the boss. I'm not sure the rest of the organization is propelling their career working from home.
But yet the bosses want to work in the office as much as they're working from home.
There are strong proponents of work from home in that are bosses,
Mhm.
and they're the ones who are really having a great time. Most CEOs don't want work from home.
Yes,
They,
CEOs, yes.
yeah.
You're talking middle management, you know.
Well, no, there are some
Upper
CEOs
management.
talaga. There's some CEOs talaga that like work from home.
Ah.
They like it. But they're very few. But my point there is that your CEO didn't get there by working from home.
Yeah.
But now that he's there,
Cruising na siya eh.
Yeah.
Di ba?
so now that he's there, he's just gonna chillax in the house, attend Zoom calls in his shorts and whatever. And your career is probably not gonna prosper in the same way in the next 10 years, the way he's been toiling in the office every day.
Yung exchange of ideas iba eh. The engagement is different,
Yeah.
you know. Can't do it through Zoom. I mean, in your honest opinion, do you think the Pogos will come back? And you see, the biggest problem, and we talk to a lot of the lawmakers, and we have a lot of friends in the industry, and the biggest issue that they have besides it being political at some point, diba? What they're saying is a lot of them don't comply. Mas marami bang nagko-comply na pogo kesa sa hindi? Who rent
Who's to say? I
properties?
don't know. I
It's
don't
really
know.
hard to say, no?
It's really hard to say, but it reminds me of when the BPO sector started. When the BPO sector started, the Philippines became a breeding ground for scammers.
Yeah.
Diba?
So it's nothing new.
Hiding under
It's nothing
BPO. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you open up another industry, scammers will use that, diba? And we just have to be diligent in catching people, and we shouldn't be bought. The problem is we keep making this problem as if it's just a pogo side problem. We have
Takes two to tango.
we
diba?
have to admit to ourselves that okay, we are part of the problem, right? Nabibili tayo eh.
Corruption. Yeah.
The corruption is a huge problem.
And
You cannot just say drive all these people out.
some of them even are kasocios. So, that's the sad part eh, di ba? May corruption na may kasosyo pa. So, protectionism at its finest. Kaya yan ang naging problem.
The solution is not okay because we are not reliable. We have to cull all these
Yeah.
all these operations because I always tell people that sa car dealing lang. The car dealer who's predominantly 95% of them
Female.
are women,
Yes.
right? Those people are being paid 50,000 to 80,000 pesos a month.
What industry
hours,
do you
ah.
know?
8 hours. 8 hours. Civilized work. Okay, it's not the most fantastic work, right? But hey, I think there's a good skills match with the demand of the job. Diba? There's a good fit. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people unemployed right
How
now.
do you
Women.
replace that?
How do you replace that? And what do you think will they do to compensate for that loss of income now?
While being used to the lifestyle that 80,000 a month pays.
Yeah. And let's say hindi naman sila abusado I mean, they're not living the life at
Yes,
50,
yes.
80,000, but their siblings are depending on that
Yes.
money, their parents are depending on that money. How are you going to do that? The drivers who used to be paid 10,000, 12,000, pilitan pa, are now being paid 30, 40,000
Sa Pogo, yeah.
sa Pogo. And that's a fair wage all of a sudden. And with bonuses and tips, that's probably racking up to 50,000.
And that feeds several families. And
What
yeah,
about the
you're right.
waiters who are enjoying all these tips? What about all the cooks in the restaurants? Now you go to the Bay Area, all the restaurants are dead.
So it's really a tall order to replace these.
It's gonna take time. It's gonna take time. We have to figure out another industry that will come in to and it's gonna take time.
You think the PPO industry has growth potential pa?
It certainly has. I think for the next 6-7 years, yes, there's concern about AI, but I think for the Philippines, AI will be a job generator. The AI industry will generate jobs for Philippines, net. More jobs than lose jobs. Because as far as all the people that I've talked to, we will start training the AI. So the Philippines and India will become havens for training AI.
AI is a tool
AI
that somebody
is a tool.
still needs to use.
Yes, but it's also a tool that's becoming smarter and smarter. This is how I look at it. It's like we're training a baby. So we are going to be the nanny of this baby until this baby grows up to be a
Self-sufficient,
full
yeah.
adult. And then that full adult will, let's say your son, So I'm the CEO of the company, my son takes over my job. In the meantime that he's not an adult yet, we're just going to train that baby to adulthood. And the most common example used is the self-driving car. The self-driving car needs so much training, even up to now. Even after so many rides, you're still training it to be better. Because at the moment, the AI cannot compete with the judgment calls made by a human for now.
Especially here,
Especially
where things
here.
are more
Or in India.
dynamic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I don't know if you've ever been in a car in Mumbai, but my God, it's like a roller coaster but scarier.
It makes an experience here more pleasant ba? Oh.
This is nothing. The drivers here are nothing compared to Mumbai.
Tapos may motor pa.
Yeah, and I'm like in the front seat, right? And I'm always holding to my knees because it's like, how did we not crash into these people? Anyway, so AI is going to create more jobs, at least for the next foreseeable future. There is an issue though, because Moore's law, some people say Moore's law is getting outdated. So Moore's law says that the computing power doubles every 2 years, right? So it's basically the square of a number
Mm-hmm.
every 2 years.
It exponentiates. Eh.
Yeah. But now that Moore's law is extinct because or outdated because it's giving way to
Or
what they
five.
call the Jensen law, named after Jensen Huang of the CEO of Nvidia.
NVIDIA.
So now it's not going to be to the power of 2 every 2 years. It's going to be power of 3, 4, 5 every 2 years. And that difference is massive. So the IQ of AI, whatever it is today, is just going to become smarter and smarter, super, super smarter in a very short span of time. And I think that cutoff is going to be 6 years from now in 2030.
Where things get left
Well,
behind.
the gap between our IQ and their IQ is going to be so big. And like what this episode of Steve Jobs' new documentary, he was saying that unlike you and I, we can have super competence in one field of knowledge. Like you, supercars.
Through experience.
Nobody can beat you
Experience.
about supercars, right?
Not really. More armored vehicles.
Our
Wala ko
movie.
alam sa supercars.
Okay, so
Hindi ako kasya eh.
so so you are the super expert for nobody's gonna beat you about armored cars, right? But then the AI can compete with you and be smarter than you and still
And
be
something
smarter
else.
than me in real estate. And so multiple skills at a very high level. I think that's the issue. And nobody really knows what that means until 2030, when that gap between, because of these new chips being produced by Nvidia and like companies, the IQ of AI is going to be insane.
But with technology that's exponentiating, there comes demand for servers, power.
Yes, but then what do you do? Let's say it is true. Let's say it's true that what they fear is going to happen will happen. That AI all of a sudden takes jobs, right? So what do you do with all the office buildings? What do you do when people start defaulting on their mortgages
Because
on
you
a
don't have
mass
jobs,
scale
yeah.
because they don't have jobs? So yes, you then shift the money from office and residential space to data centers.
Yeah.
But then what are you going to do with the cities or the houses? And and why? Why is that? So people are saying, "Oh, Philippines vulnerable to AI. Bad. Don't invest in Philippines because the biggest driver of the economy is going to go extinct." And I go, "Wait a second. Before you complain about the BPO job, you have to look at so many other lower end jobs because right now OpenAI and Tesla are building their own robot capabilities. Tesla has made it so pronounced that in 18 months they should be rolling out their robots for
It's actually scary.
$20,000 $20,000 per person, per robot, which is 6 months wages of a burger flipper. Okay, 6 months wage, you have a new robot, and
That
that
doesn't
robot
get tired. Yeah.
that doesn't get, but it's supposed to be your domestic helper. So working the farm, working the garage, working your house, working in your street sweeper, all those jobs, menial, like day-to-day jobs that a lot of people are doing, working very hard to do, are all of a sudden going to be replaced by robots. Construction workers, farm workers, burger flippers, restaurant workers, all those things will be replaced by robots. And that base of jobs is bigger than the BPO jobs we're talking about in the Philippines. So you're going to have a massive humanitarian crisis if this really happens. Very plausible. It's very, very plausible. Whether it happens in 6 years or 60 years, I don't know. But as far as I know, The goal of Tesla in 18 months is to have Optimus rolled out for $20,000 doing domestic chores. I don't know. I did ride the Waymo
In San
in San
Francisco.
Francisco, the Google car, and my God, I loved it. I super loved it. It's like I don't want to ride any other car, really.
This is yung malaki. This is the one that looks yeah.
It's a Range
Yeah,
Rover.
yeah.
It looks like a Discovery.
Yeah.
Discovery, is that
The smaller one.
yeah, the smaller
Yes,
one. It
yes.
looks just like that.
Wow.
Beautiful, super luxe, driverless, and you can have a full glass of water and it probably won't spill because it's so calculated with the every turn, every time there's a bump, and San Francisco roads are not how it
Not
used to be.
perfect. Yeah, not perfect.
So they're so bumpy now, and yet the car is so conscious about that. And then you take the Uber car and you take the driver car, and it's so bumpy the ride, and everything's so jerky. So when you get used to the Waymo ride, you don't want to go elsewhere.
Wow.
And that's like still in a prototype, and it's almost the same cost as an Uber Black.
You rode it. It's live na.
Yeah,
It's in beta or
I don't know
ready na
what's
siya for.
yeah, it's
for
super ready.
deployment,
It's
yeah.
apparently it's all over. It's over most parts of San Francisco and Austin, Texas. I have not been to Austin, Texas, but certainly I saw it everywhere I was in San Francisco. It was imagine how many more companies are going to launch their version
Of Waymo, yeah.
of Waymo.
While they're battling on new technology and new Waymos coming out, we're still battling about jeepney modernization here.
Waymo Jeep,
You
the
know,
Waymo Jeep.
diba? And God forbid it's another mass protest by Piston or whoever, because not only are their jeepneys going to be replaced, they're going to be replaced. Period.
Yeah,
So imagine. Yeah.
it's going to be a mind F talaga, and you have to kind of expand your horizons to say what is really possible. Because I remember in the 90s, right, when everyone is on Nokia and Siemens and Ericsson,
And then the iPhone comes out.
and they're saying, oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna watch a program from your
Your
phone, really? To like, this now has more computing power than your laptop.
Than your laptop.
Im- Would 20 years ago, 10 years ago, would you have agreed that that was possible? No
Actually,
way.
rephrase that. Your phone has more computing power than most desktops that
Okay.
haven't been upgraded.
Yeah,
I mean, there's desktops now that are, but how many people do you see use desktops anymore?
yeah.
Unless they're playing computer games, diba? Mostly laptops na ngayon eh. So everybody's mobile. Kaya it's interesting how that's going to change our lives. We're lucky enough, we're probably in our 50s, and we're looking at the tail end, or at least I think so, but like you said, midterm.
Midterm. Wala pang midterm.
Wala pa midterm.
If we're going to live to 200
200,
or 150,
that's
di
like
wala pa tayong
one-fourth pa lang.
one-fourth pa lang, di ba?
So, hence when they say 50 is the new 25.
yeah. And then you ask yourself, okay, David, so what? What the hell is all this? Well, it
You're
all
gonna run out of
translates-
money, man.
No.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you have to think long
Long
term
term.
about your savings and investments. But it also means more demand for real estate because
Yes.
there will be more time for people to afford real estate eventually. Affordability is a problem, so I still don't know what that means. But in Europe, in most developed countries in Europe, they are already at quasi universal income. Meaning, if you're jobless, the government will give you a stipend that is minimum.
Norway being one. Yeah.
Norway being one, where the minimum money you need to have a decent life
Food,
lifestyle.
shelter, clothing. Yes.
So you're not rich, but you're not going to be destitute like what we have here. Millions of Filipinos are living. So universal income is already somewhat brewing in the minds of many policymakers. And what are we going to do after that? You know, uh, and how will the Philippines position itself as a country in the world that is heading this way? You know, more than just being the yaya of the AI until the AI doesn't need the yaya
Yeah, there's an
anymore.
idea. Yeah.
Diba? That's what we all have to figure out as a collective
Do
because
we actually have a think tank
a plan.
that's? Do we have people? I'm
Yes,
sure.
fortunately, the certain people in government and working with IBPAP, the organization I'm in, the BPO Association of the Philippines, is trying to figure that out. It's a very big cloud because people can't face it. There, a lot of people are in denial that this is going to happen. They still are not concretizing it, but we have to make a plan because whether we like it or not, Tesla and other companies are heading this way. It's unstoppable. Nvidia's heading this way, you know.
What I mean, the good thing about your position is you have access to all these smart people who actually think beyond current events, diba? Because most people, when they watch the news, they argue about the news. Eh? The guys that you actually hang out with, they look at ahead. Do we actually have companies here that are exploring that problem and looking to capitalize on the problem?
We're servicing companies right now that are going to build the first GPU data center here in the Philippines. Every other data center that is operating here, and there's about 50 to 60 of them that are setting up.
Even with the high cost of
Even with the high
electricity.
cost of electricity, they're still
Wow.
coming back here. And why? Because we are Western centric, and when data is going to be housed locally, Western companies will want Western centric aligned countries to house data, and Philippines being fortunately one of them. But then cloud data, that's one thing, the cloud based data. But then there's the AI driven GPU data for data centers, and that's going to
Massive.
be
Yeah.
massive and transformational also.
Isn't the demand for power and connectivity higher compared to just a regular cloud data center? Would be interesting to
Yeah,
see the
the
difference in
difference, yes,
capacity, no?
there's probably more sophistication because you need a lot more cooling. So this is where you don't need air conditioning. Well, you don't need just air conditioning. In addition to air conditioning, you need these liquids that where you submerge the chip.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the stuff. That's the level of cooling that's so different. So it's bringing a new kind of mindset, a new kind of technology into the Philippines, and that's going to be amazing. In addition to that, there's so many BPO workers here training AI right now.
Ah,
So yes, so that is all here, and all that translates to real estate, and that's why I have to get involved in trying to see the next trends because
yeah.
all those trends will have either a threat or a boom for real estate.
So something to look forward to in the next 5 years,
6 6.
6 years. So what's next for David Leechiu? For
Huh?
besides
I have to save.
besides looking at planning, I mean,
I have to save enough money till I'm 200. And how many girlfriends would that be between now and then? Um,
David is available, right? Is you know
somewhat.
somewhat. So you can reach him in the office at David Leechiu and Associates, and I can vouch for him. So
I also make it a campaign to help people realize how good it is in the Philippines. Grabe. You know, the kindness that we have to show each other, whether we mean it or not. The economics supporting the Philippines is still very sound compared to the rest of the world. We have to be acknowledging that. And if you don't believe me, you're free to validate it and be grateful. And after being grateful, do something positive about it
instead of bashing all day on
yeah,
social media,
yeah,
right? It
yeah,
becomes very, very toxic and it breeds upon itself. That's the sad part.
yeah.
Yeah. it creates a really negative mindset. And instead of being creative and coming out of a problem, you just perpetuate the problem.
Mm-mm. I would encourage you and everyone else who haven't done this yet to visit SpaceX, the website. Just look at the first lines. You know what's going to hit you? It's going to hit you with their slogan. And the slogan says to make humanity multiplanetary. Just imagine that, right? To make humanity multiplanetary. Now, you and I are concerned about super mundane stuff. Where to go grocery today, how to payroll, when am I gonna do my Christmas shopping, blah blah blah.
How to go to a party na it's 2 hours traffic.
Yeah, it's stupid stuff, right? But
This guy is.
this guy is like, li-
How do we live in Mars?
think about
Right.
think about the vision required to be able to say something that strong with conviction
And actually backing it up.
and backing it up, right? With actual funding and effort. While I'm not encouraging people to think about, okay, let's go to Jupiter or whatever. But my point is to always look at the sky and think of lofty things to aspire for, despite of all the
The
problems
noise.
and the
The
noise.
noise. Yeah.
And despite how difficult it might seem to achieve, do we have to aspire for things beyond us?
Piggybacking off that, what would you say? Because this is the we have a lot of followers on Facebook, and naman ang profile ng mga tao minsan, we cover A to E. And one of the things that I've noticed when they ask, they comment or they actually PM me and say, Sir, kaya niyong sabihin yan kasi komportable kayo. Kaya niyong mag-isip ng ibang bagay kasi komportable kayo. Whereas sila, they're just trying to survive day to day. And I think there's a happy medium between the two, no? Because a lot of people that went through that actually became successful. Coming from you, what kind of advice can you give somebody who has that type of a mindset? And I think the reason why they have that type of a mindset is because they're just so beaten down from their parents playing online casino and nauubos yung pera, imbis na pambayad ng kuryente, pinambababa. They're beaten down so much. So, and I get that all the time, which is beautiful, which is great on my end because I get to experience a lot of these people. What would you say to somebody with that type of mindset?
I would go and say, be inspired by two people. One is Henry C., and the other one is John Gokongwei. So, these two guys are the two richest people in the Philippines when they were alive. They both passed away. But they have one thing in common. They had nothing when they started. So, Mr. C arrived here when he was very young. I forget how old he was, but
Teens ata.
no English, no Tagalog, can only speak Chinese, not educated. And yet, with that, he was able to hustle and build something. I remember when North EDSA opened for the first time, his first big mall. And it's like,
Because wow. It was
wow,
the biggest.
right?
We never had that.
but what was going on in the country? Coup d'etat after coup d'etat under the Aquino administration. Why would anyone open up a mall that size when the economic conditions are so dire? Diba? And yet he did it. And look at him after that. People keep saying up to today, oh, don't you think the mall space is saturated, etc., etc. And yet they continue to do so well.
We continue to build.
And they are unchanged because they're so humble despite all the success. And the Gokongwei family, the same. John Gokongwei lost his dad, and according to the book he wrote, all their wealth got wiped out, and he had to stop school and work, and he
You're
had
selling
to
chanelas.
he had to start from very very modest means and grew an empire on back of that. So, and then I talked to so many people abroad who look at the Philippines as an investment haven, as a place where they can actually start again and do well. Then I go, after hearing all these people and studying the life of Mr. C and Mr. Gokongwei, why do so many of us complain about life here? That there's nothing, that everything is so hopeless here. And then you get to meet people who are so eager to come here and start a new life here. And they have started lives here. If you
And
look
they've
at,
done well.
and they've done well. I mean, if you look at all the China diaspora of the people who landed here from China in the Philippines, they had nothing, no money, no network, no language, and yet they were able to build so much. And then everyone who's here just complain that na walang pag-asa dito. And so the mindset has to change, and that's probably connected to the SpaceX inspiration.
Yes.
You know, na we have problems. It's not perfect. We're far from perfect, but there are many opportunities here. We just have to stop complaining and try to solve the problems. And in all practicality, my parents went through that. When I remember accompanying my mom selling food in Meralco building, and we would use the stairs because we weren't allowed in the elevators. So I was, in the same way that you go to an office and you'll see this old woman with a
Selling suman
young
or
boy
whatever.
selling
Yes.
suman and turon.
Yes.
That was my mom and I selling fish balls and squid balls and bola bola to Meralco employees during the day, and then whatever we received in the evening, we would go back to Divisoria and pay the person who lent us those goods, and whatever we had left over, we would use to buy in the market in Agora. So people would buy in Agora in the wet market in the mornings when everything is fresh. We would go in the evening because that's the only time we would have any excess money to buy food. From coming from that to like thinking about where we are today as a family is unthinkable at 10, 11, 12. You know, it's unthinkable. And so I always encourage people to not be limited by their ambitions. Don't ever say, I can't do this. Challenge yourself to try to do more. And hopefully you do it ethically.
And don't be I guess to piggyback off that, not to be constrained with where you are. Because I think a lot of us, get too used to where they are, and instead of working, instead of looking at long term, we tend to get stuck, especially with all the noise, especially with social media nowadays. That's why you get all the hate on social media. It's because they're having a tough time,
Yeah.
and that's I think that's the biggest issue we have. So, wow, that's a lot of wisdom, David. So,
Hopefully.
no, because we,
Hopefully.
we do have a lot of our snippets will be chopped up, and we will do a lot of motivational stuff with what you just said and what you've imparted to a lot of our listeners, because they need that. And it's funny because sometimes I would post and I would get a message and say, some guy or some girl would say, "Sir, I needed that because I'm having a bad day." So sometimes it's little things we say that can inspire someone, and we don't know that can be the next John Gokongwei, right? And they can look back and say, "It's what David Leechiu said." David, thank you very much for any parting words to our viewers and listeners.
I just wish everyone all the best. Work hard, work honestly, save, and try not to get caught up in all this pressure to buy stuff, and dream big dreams.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thanks very much, David, for
Thank you.
gracing us
Thank you.
at King Panda TV. So, guys, till next time, keep watching.